Morning, all. Welcome to Coffee with Craig. We're just sitting here reading through the news, checking out some things. Today, wanted to talk to you about a really cool, well, I don't say cool case, but a decision that came down. Some of you are familiar with the Tesher case. This is a case about three guys who retired, wanted to own a gun store, wanted to open a gun store in the county of Alameda. One of them, John Tesher, actually was a former gun store owner for 30 years. So they go through the entire process to try and open a gun store. They file all the paperwork, they start looking for locations, yada, yada, yada. Well, one of the rules that they have in the county of Alameda, and it's not unique to Alameda, was that the gun store couldn't be within 500, I think it's feet or yards, couldn't be within 500 feet of a residential properties or of schools, parks, yada, yada, yada. Now, so when they started looking for facilities, well, at first they found a couple of places, and the folks said, well, you know, how do you measure? And they said, well, we measure from, the back door, or at least the nearest entrance to where that is. And they said, well, this community over here is within 500 feet. I said, well, but he said, but we don't have a back door. So then they said, okay, well, we'll measure it from the front. Well, then they went and they changed their mind. They're not going to measure from the front. They measured from the outside of the building. So, okay, so they're less than 500 feet. So then they go and once again, they keep looking. They're looking for other locations. They found another location. Now, this location seemed perfect. They seemed like they had everything done, everything ready to go. And then someone filed a complaint because they said that they were within 500 feet. The only problem being is that in between them and this residential community are 8 lanes of the Nimitz Freeway in the Bay Area. We're talking, 65 mile per hour highway is between them and this community. But yet they said it's within 500 feet. We consider it to be a nuisance. By the way, this was after giving them a preliminary waiver, allowing them originally to say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and we're going to approve it. Then they decided, they changed their mind and said, nope, we're not going to approve it. So they took them to court. Now, the interesting thing is that the judge who first heard this case basically said, no, there's no basis. There's no basis for this case. There's no reason why they should be able to open a gun store. There's already gun stores open in the unincorporated county. Because, see, the problem is that based on the policies that they had in place, there was absolutely no facility in the entire unincorporated county of Alameda where they could have their gun store. In fact, another look later determined that even the gun stores that were currently in existence couldn't meet this particular requirement. But see, they had been grandfathered in, so it was okay. So why is this a problem? Why would you say, well, this is an issue? Well, it's because, number one, you're saying that there are absolutely going to be no new gun stores in all of Alameda County. And if any of the existing gun stores were to close or to lose their lease or decide they wanted to move, well, guess what? They're done, because there would be the location they're in wouldn't meet it, and any location that they move to wouldn't meet this particular requirement. Now, all of this is despite the fact that there is absolutely zero evidence that gun stores attract gun violence or that they attract any crime or are a public nuisance whatsoever. It's just that, well, hey, some people don't like guns, so therefore they don't want a gun store in their county, not just in their neighborhood, but not in their county. Anyway, so the first judge just said, well, you know what, there are already gun stores, so we're gonna toss the case out. So people are not being infringed of their Second Amendment right because they can go and they can buy their firearms or they can do their transactions at one of the existing stores. Well, that then went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where a 3-judge panel basically said, no, you know what, you can't just throw it out. You at least have to hear the evidence. You have to at least make the county give some evidence as to the fact that this would create a public nuisance, that this policy isn't just an infringement on the right to keep and bear arms, that by limiting the ability of someone to be able to sell firearms or to be able to conduct firearms transactions, you are in fact going to be restricting their right to exercise their ability to exercise their right. So the three-judge panel said, no, you guys at least need to come up with some proof. Well, now the Ninth Circuit Court of Schlemiels, or the Ninth Circus Court of Appeals, decided, well, you know what? We want to hear this case en banc. Now, what en banc means is we're going to have a larger group of judges that are going to hear this case. It's going to be an 11-judge panel. Now, the reason why this is significant and it is, predictable, but it's not the end of the story. And the reason why is because we all know the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is largely made up of anti-gun, left-wing Democratic appointees who believe if they can unwrite the Second Amendment or they can erase it from the Constitution from the bench, they would. We know this. So every once in a while, we get victories because we get, a majority, or we get 2 out of 3 reasonable judges in these small panels. But by the time you get to an 11-judge panel, it's really going to be difficult to get a victory out of that 11-judge panel. Now, once again, though, but having said that, that's going to be the next step after that is going to be, hopefully, the Supreme Court. Now, the challenge, once again, and you've heard me say this a number of times, the challenge is going to be getting the Supreme Court to actually take up Second Amendment cases. But I think that there are enough Second Amendment cases that are coming their direction. They're going to have to chime in. They're going to eventually have to start to answer some of these questions that are coming out of various different of the circuit the circuit cases. They're going to have to eventually take up these cases and be heard. Anyway, so I just wanted to report to you. So yeah, the Tesher case is going to be heard by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals en banc, going to be heard by a larger panel. I am not enthused at what the potential outcome will be, but I am interested to see what their argument is going to be for allowing someone to not at least hear the facts, because that's what's at stake here. It is whether or not they actually have to provide evidence that gun stores lead to crime and gun violence. They have to actually provide that proof. And here's the interesting thing is if the courts were to decide that, then it doesn't just apply to this zoning case. Think of all of the times that legislators have gotten up in committee and gotten up on the floor of the state legislature and declared things and declared that their bill was going to change the world, that it was going to save lives with absolutely no evidence. That restricting the rights of law-abiding citizens, they were taking the rights of law-abiding citizens, saying that they were saving lives with absolutely no evidence. Now, if they were required to provide evidence, wow, now that would be something. That would definitely be something to see, because as we all know, they're not real interested in facts, are they? So let's go to the phone lines or to the social media verse and see what some of you folks have to say on this particular topic. Do you know when? From Barry. I don't exactly know when it's going to be heard. I can tell you that it's probably, I don't know if it's going to be soon or not. I'm sure they'll probably announce it. You can bet that it's going to take a while. Right now, I was just reading an article, there's 103 vacancies currently in the federal court system that are going to need to be filled by President Trump, President-elect Trump. So I'm a big advocate. I heard one radio talk show host saying that we need to push President Trump to appoint 100 pro-Second Amendment justices in 100 days. So in the first 100 days. So I'm 100% down for that. But you can bet as soon as we know, you'll know. Too bad judges today cannot put their personal views aside and be impartial. And that is a sad part, because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to go in, take a look at a situation, take a look at the law, and how does this compare and relate to the Constitution, and implement and implement the law based on the facts. What you have too often now is you have people who have a personal perspective, and the only evidence that they're interested in is well, evidence that supports their conclusion. See, when you're a judge, you're supposed to do everything deductively. In other words, you take all of the information and you put out a decision, right? What's happening more and more with judges, in particular judges on the left, is that they're coming in with a particular perspective. They're doing it what's called inductively. They've already determined the conclusion, and so they're seeking out facts and information that support their end conclusion. And that's how, when you read some of these decisions, you look at them and you wonder, what the heck is this person thinking? Well, the fact is they already made up their mind. They're just looking for evidence that supports it. Let's see. Ninth Circuit Kangaroo Court needs to go, Douglas. Yes, Douglas. Yes, they do need to go. They are, in fact, the Ninth Circuit is the most overturned of all of these circuit courts, and it's a wonder why not. The Ninth should always be referred to as a circus until it has fewer clowns. Agreed. Don't you mean Coffee with Craig and the Ninth Circus Court? See any other interesting comments? With the passage of the bullet button ban, this is the only a step away from banning removable magazines. What can we do to stop this? Well, okay, I'll answer this question only because it is slightly relevant, and that is that, most of our success has come in the courts. The many gun rights organizations that have been filing cases have had their successes in defending rights, whether it's the Second Amendment Foundation, whether it's the NRA, CRPA, Cal Guns Foundation, all of these groups. Our biggest successes are in the courts. Now, the challenge is this: court cases aren't sexy. There's not like a constant flow of, okay, a bill's been introduced and now it's going to committee and now they voted on it, it's going to the next committee and it's going to be voted on the floor. I mean, all of that, it's really easy to get hype and get people excited and get people information and get people constantly engaged. The hard part with a court case is you file the court case and then you wait forever before you could finally just start filing motions and paperwork. And then you have to wait a while before you actually start sending in, your arguments. And then eventually, let me clarify. Eventually you get to actually hear the case, and that's if there are no motions that you're arguing. For example, in Tesher, what we're arguing here is the fact that the judge approved a motion to just throw it out. The case hasn't even been heard yet. So, it can take a while. But most wars, most fights worth fighting do take a while. And so that's why, we need you guys to be patient with us. Not just us. I'm not just talking about FPC. I'm talking about all of the gun rights groups that are fighting these things in court. You got to be patient with us because, we're dealing with a system where we got to work our way through the system. And eventually we got to get it to the Supreme Court where we can actually have our voice heard. And once again, this is a Supreme Court that hasn't heard a Second Amendment case since, 2010? I think McDonald was the last case that they heard. So it's going to take a while. So be patient, be active, and be involved. Let's see here. Any other questions? How do we find out which representatives running for office support Second Amendment so we can vote them out? Well, a number of organizations do voter report cards. I know that the NRA does one. I know the Gun Owners of California does one. I personally happen to prefer ours, the Firearms Policy Coalition. We grade every single member on every single gun vote, and so their grades come out. So it's not just selected bills. We take a look at every single bill that has to deal with the Second Amendment, and members are graded, not just graded whether or not on how they voted on it. Were they a sponsor? Were they an author? Were they a co-author? However they voted. So, it's a little weighted because some members will vote on more gun bills than others. But having said that, there are plenty of resources that are out there for you to determine how representatives vote. Unfortunately, when it comes to those who have not been elected yet, Some groups do questionnaires, and those are, those can be helpful, but you really don't know until they get in office and they actually start voting. Well, that's going to be it for Coffee with Craig today. Want to encourage you, go, theguns.com was the place that talks a little bit about the case. Now, in all due reverence, they say it was that it got overturned. The victory got overturned. It didn't really get overturned. It's just that now we're going to basically it's going to be heard before a larger panel. Once again, the larger panel is unlikely to be favorable to gun owners, so that headline might eventually be correct. But overall, it's still kind of a wait and see. So anyway, folks, you take care, and we'll talk at you again tomorrow.
If you like these updates, please share them with your friends and subscribe to our YouTube channel.